punishment for going on about ghosts and hauntings. 100 times? More? Stop filling your sister's head with such foolishness. You'll give her nightmares. It's beautiful, Jess said as they passed more moss-draped oaks. Her mother turned in her seat, looking stern. Remember our agreement? Jess nodded, although she was 18 now, even if it was only by a few months. Of course, the agreement she'd made with her mother still held, since she had been 17 when they'd first agreed on the deal. Jess had been raised to believe that promises and deals were something you followed through on. Part of the reason her mother had given in to Jess's participation in Dr. Brandt's study was to prove that ghosts didn't exist, that anything Jess thought she had seen was nothing more than a young girl's grief and an overactive imagination. The agreement? If the study produced no solid evidence, Jess would give up her fascination with ghosts. Jess found it both amusing and sad how sometimes promises and deals became more complicated the older she got. Jess fumbled clumsily for the door handle as Paul pulled the vehicle to a stop. She pushed the door open and got out, still staring at the house. Siler House was like the belle of the ball, dressed in elegant black, discreetly standing in the shadows and watching her guests. The place looked more like a plantation home or mansion than a regular house. It stood proudly, an expanse of well-kept brick and stone with an angular roofline etched high against the sky and an English garden at its feet. Not just proud, Jess amended. Siler House imparted a certain sense of arrogance. She supposed anything built more than 100 years ago and still standing had a right to such an exaggerated air of importance. More so if there was any truth to what Dr. Brandt, the parapsychologist and head of the study, had said. He claimed that Siler House and the spirits within it might be the real thing, a channel into the afterlife. At last, this was it. For a whole month it would be her, Dr. Brandt, and 3 other participants roughly her age. And, if everything went well, ghosts. Lots of ghosts. It was like spring break, only for paranormal freaks. Car doors slammed behind her. Jess, wait! Her mother's exasperated tone barely registered. Yes, this was the place. Or at least she hoped. Jess had been to places on an even grander scale, like the Biltmore estate back home in Asheville. Even in Chimney Rock there were Victorian homes she suspected were just as old as Siler House. But none of them made a first impression like this. Excitement flooded her senses and she bit her lip. Please, please let this work. Why can't you wait for the rest of us? Her mother said, the slightest edge of disapproval in her voice. Why do you always have to be in a hurry? What she really meant was that Jess was too much like her father, which was fine with her, especially since his recent death. Her father hadn't remarried and he'd died alone. How could Jess explain that Siler House was hope, a chance to reconnect with her dad and Grams? Her grandmother had been her first ghost sighting. After Grams died, Jess doubted that what she was seeing was her ghost. But soon afterward, Jess started to see other ghosts, too. People appeared in the crowd one minute and disappeared the next. Sometimes they terrified her, like the 2 women who'd popped up in an otherwise empty department store bathroom. Once, Jess witnessed an angry ghost who was behind a restaurant bar. The ghost somehow caused a patron to spill his drink. But most of the ghosts she saw were perfectly harmless and often shy. A few were even afraid of the living. Ghosts didn't appear all the time, which was probably a good thing, or Jess figured she'd have been sent to the psychiatrist's office a lot more often. Since Grams's death a few years ago, the sightings came and went. Sometimes weeks went by before Jess saw a ghost. Jess hadn't minded. Ghosts were ghosts, and by definition, creepy, no matter how social or well-meaning. When her dad had died back in January, Jess had waited, certain she'd see him again. Nights, weeks, and months had passed, but he never came to her. Not like Grams. Not like the